development. I'm sorry that Hope couldn't be here. Hope Becker, our community development specialist, has done a great job in working with the Ashland Museum, our partners here, to set up these historic district education seminars. And so thank you for coming to our second education session, and we hope that you can come to our next ones. And so tonight, I'm going to speak a little bit later, but first we're going to have Jimmy Kastelberg, who is the retired owner of Caravati's here in the town of Ashland. And if you haven't heard him speak before, you're in for a treat because he's a fabulous storyteller. And so I'm excited to hear what he has to share with us. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jimmy.
Thank you. Well, first I want to say hello to everyone and good evening. It's an honor to be here and to share a lot of my life over a work period of over 40 years. And actually it was probably longer than that because I started working at Caravati's for my grandfather when I was 12. We were over in South Richmond. We were on it was an old lumber yard that had sheds and shacks, and I remember my grandfather having to climb the telephone pole to answer the phone. I'm just kidding. There was an old phone there, but we had all kinds of different tasks to do as they were taking buildings down and they were bringing materials in. So I'll give you a brief history of that. He started Caravati's, it was founded in 1939, and that was, when I look back on the time, it was a very significant year that he started. It was right before the outbreak of World War II. And then the business picked up shortly after the war, 1945, 1946. And one thing that he was known for many things, but one thing was old brick. So they salvaged a lot of old brick, and some of it was used to build the homes in downtown Richmond. A lot of them were built in the near West End, and then also on the outskirts of Richmond. I'm sure there are old homes in Ashland. I was just at a house the other day on Duncan Street that was built in 1963. That's a colonial house that just sold, but it had old brick. So old brick had to come from somewhere. There were other yards in town. Redford Brick Company was one of them who also salvaged that as well. But I think my grandfather probably sold the majority of those things because he had a lot of them at the time. So anyhow, he knew the boom was going to be coming. Interstates were being bought through, houses were being condemned, and he felt that there was a huge need in reclaiming all these house parts, that somebody could use these and they could breathe some new life in them. So we as children, I'm one of 36 grandchildren. My grandparents had 7 daughters and no sons. All of us had a summer job if we wanted one. So one of my jobs was working in the stripping tank, and we would strip doors, and we would strip the door casings that went around the doors, and this is what it looked like when they came out of the vat. All right, it was not a real friendly job. It was dirty. He would give me an extra $1 to take home so my mother could buy some more detergent to wash our clothes, because basically after that your clothes were ruined. So anyways, we could get basically all the paint off. And until 1978, when the regulations came to be, everything had lead-based paint on it. So it was important to clean it. It was very important to clean it if you were going to use it in a house that was going to be rehabbed and inspected. So all the woodwork had to be clean. So that was our job. The other job we had, he used to put us in the hot sun under an old tin roof, and or roofing, I should say. Just there were pieces of tin over top of us, and we would clean hard upon flooring. And I want you all to notice, if you can see this, how thick this is. Back in those days when this was laid, 16th century, late 17th century, the spacing between the floor joists back in the day, was usually 2 feet. And they could get away with that because the boards are so thick they wouldn't bend. Today it's 16 inches. So they didn't have a thickness planer back in those days. So they would hand hewn the back of the floorboards so all the boards would be level over the joists, because sometimes the joists varied also in height and thickness as well. So the nails that were in here, they were iron nails, and they would break off, and we had to use a lot of hammers and wood, the nail punches, to pop all the old nails out of them. And then we had a planer. Sometimes if they were really bad, we'd run them through a planer, and then he would turn around and sell heart pine flooring for homes that wanted to use it. So that was another job. So we all got a pretty good taste. He would put us in the brick pile, and we'd clean all the old mortar off the brick. And I'll tell you this, it was limestone mortar, and it was pretty easy, but the problem is there were thousands of bricks. So we stacked them in lots of 500 on a pallet, and that's how we kept them. And we would sell any amount that you wanted to buy, but usually they were 500 on a pallet. So we kept those jobs going, those tasks going. My grandfather lived to be 85 years old and died in December of 1983. My mother and her sisters went all the way around the family, and they were asking the question, who wants to run the family business? My uncles, who were not Caravatis, who married into the family, I think they all ran the other way. They didn't want any parts of it. Cousins were already established with jobs. We finished school in 1981, so a lot of us already had our jobs, our first jobs. I sold beer for a living. I had a really good job. I drove a beer truck for Loveland Distributing Company, and worked for my grandfather on Saturdays. So they came around to me, and I thought about it. I went to my boss, who at the time was Leon Stepanian. He was probably in his late 70s, early 80s. And he said, Jimmy, I want you to go run that business. And if it doesn't work out, he said, my door is always open to you. Which in today's corporate world, I'm not so sure you'd get that these days. But that was a good feeling, because I felt like I had taken some bricks off me, so to speak. And there was a lot of burden. So anyways, I think Lane was pregnant with our second child, then our second son. And I think she came to the old Caravati location one day, and I think she was in tears and asked me if I was going to make a living doing this. I said, I'm going to try. So 40-some years later, I'm still here. So anyways, we had a good time doing that. There were some very slow days, there were some slow years, but we kept at it. We kept getting jobs, and we kept rebuilding the inventory. One reason, because we had a bad fire. My grandfather had a fire in 1981, and his yard was in South Richmond over off of Porter Street near the old Martin Chevrolet, and he lost 2/3 of his business in one day. And he was 79 then, so I mean, it was kind of hard to start over. But he did, and he kept going till he was 83. So I took over, borrowed a little money from the bank for capital, so I could continue to get these jobs and to purchase salvage rights for old buildings. That's how we acquired a lot of the things that we would reclaim, and that's how we filled up the warehouse that was downtown in Manchester. It was pretty neat. Over the years, there were generations of families that dealt with my grandfather, and then their children would deal with us, and so on. So it was pretty neat. Some of them would inherit the houses. Some of them who grew up in an old house wanted to live in an old house. So we would help them find the artifacts and a lot of materials that they would need to help renovate the house and restore it. I was when I got the email from Hope, she asked me about houses that we were involved in, and so I racked my brain, which is a task these days, and so I started with Hanover County, and there was some significant homes here in Ashland that were a lot of fun to work on. And Tom asked me earlier this evening, he said about being a part of the project, and we would immerse ourselves in the project. We showed, and we still show, a lot of interest in helping people find the things that they need. It's a little harder with a historic registered house because there's some restrictions and some regulations on what they can put in the houses because they have to be approved. So that makes it a little harder, but we usually come really close to finding the real McCoy, so to speak. I'm gonna point to the picture to the far left at the top. That is a carpenter lock. A lot of the early Hanover County homes have these locks on their doors. And they originated from the Carpenter Lock Company in England. And an interesting fact, when Australia broke off from England, they took a lot of their door hardware with them. And I ran across a good friend, and he's also a customer who lives in King William County. And they had opportunity to travel to Tasmania. And he called me one time when he got back and he said, "Jimmy, how many carpenter locks do you want?" I said, "Wow," I said, because they're really hard to find. He said, I said, "How many do you need?" He said, "Would a suitcase full work?" And the keys with them, which is unusual. So a lot of times we'd go into the homes to salvage the house, and of course there were doorknobs missing and keys, but most of the time the locks were still there. So we had a source, so if we needed keys for these locks, and if we needed the keepers that went on the jam side, he was a great source and still is. So those kind of things help us along. We sold, in the middle picture, we sold a lot of heating radiators. And we still sell some today. They're cast iron, they're heavy. Not many salvage companies want to fool with them because they're backbreaking. I mean, they're heavy things to work with, but there's a market for it. At one time before COVID, we were shipping scrolled, real fancy Victorian radiators that you'd see in some of the homes around here to a customer over in Belgium. He would fly over and he would come to Caravati's and he would ask two questions. He wanted to know where the Guinness was located and the women. And I said, "Gunther, I can help you with the Guinness, but I can't help you with the women." He was a big, strong guy. He would help us load these containers, and we would have an inch to actually spare inside the roof of the container. I mean, they would pack them in there. I told him, I said, "I never want to be on the ship with those things going down." But anyways, that was fun. It was a great market. He would refurbish them over there because I think over in the region that he was in Belgium, Antwerp and those areas, I don't think they have a lot of heat pumps over there, so they still heat with the hot water steam systems as well. So earlier I spoke, I'm just going to run down some, because you all know these homes. Hickory Hill, which is a significant house. We worked with the Pritchard family, and again, very typical things. They bought old pine flooring. He bought period brass wall sconces. Hand-blown glass, I didn't mention. There's a good market for hand-blown glass. So we salvage that, and we cut that to fit other needs and other projects. And so it's really good to hang on to that as well. They had, of course, old brick, and they also need some carpenter lock hardware that we had. College Avenue, 304, right across the street there from Rosie, was a beautiful house. I used to call it my Gone with the Wind house. I love that house. beautiful columns. When the Payrons bought it, it needed some repair. We helped them put hutch cabinets in the kitchen, which were old pine cabinets. They were beautiful. Column capitals. They had really big columns out front. They were the Scamozzi capital with the ram's horns in the corners. We helped her with a big, she needed a 42 or 44 inch wide screen door. I think we only had one. So we refurbished that for her. A couple mantelpieces and things like that. So it was fun. It was always fun working with those folks. A couple that lives on James Street, Nina and Richard, they're a retired, she was a professor, and he was an attorney, and they bought an old home over here. And in our case, they came in one day, and they saw this. This is a Victorian steeple pin hinge. It's embossed and it's made from cast iron. Normally they were patented probably about you could find them in the 1860s, 1875 to 1885 is more like it. These hinges in their house and their locks were full of old paint. And I mean, they must have had 10 coats on them. I mean, you couldn't even see as far as the pattern or anything in the locks. And so they saw these in our case, and they said, could you make our locks look like that? And our hinges, I said, well, sure we can. So we went over, I made a house call, which is always fun, because usually that turns into some other things sometimes. The next thing we know, we were pulling a fireplace mantle out of it, because they wanted to do something else with that. So we refurbished all the door hardware upstairs and down. And it's just fun going in, because your eye is drawn to certain things when you walk into a home, and that's a really neat feature. One thing that I thought was really neat I wanted to share with you tonight was, back in the early days, I'm sure in Europe and those areas, they probably had levels, they probably had leveling glasses. But I bought this tub foot, and what's really unique about this is that it has a screw-in leveler on the bottom. Extremely rare. You don't find these, and because a lot of the old houses, floors weren't plumb. So they got kind of smart back in the day, and they're able to put this on with thread so they could level the tub. An important thing for it to drain, right? So it's kind of cool. This one has also been sandblasted and cleaned up, and before most of our plating companies closed, we used to have these plated in brass, and they would do them. They would do these in chrome and nickel, and it was really, really cool on a refinished bathtub. Really looked good with the fixtures as well. So, and you're familiar with this. These are bullseyes. These are corner blocks. This is a pretty large one. That's probably almost 6 inches. Today you can still buy these, but they've scaled these down to about 4 3/4, maybe 5 inches. A lot of times people come in and they're looking for the pattern, and there are only a handful that you can buy. And so if you need to match them, sometimes we have a bunch of these that come in. Okay, so something, and these are the blocks that go above your windows and doors. Some people call them corner blocks or bullseye blocks. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that, let's see, we mentioned flooring. Stained glass. We have a little bit of stained glass in right now. There's not a whole lot in inventory at this point. Stained glass would come in from all over the place. We would have people that would call us that were moving and they couldn't take it with them. We had churches that the far stained glass arch was, we had 10 of those. They came from Grayson Falls Avenue down in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, from a Baptist church. The top window, the arch window, was it was sitting over top of a triple hung window, and they had the grapevine that went all the way down and to the floor and back up. They were 33 feet in the air, and we salvaged the entire framework and everything with them. That was a fun project. it was out of town, so we got to stay for a few days and have fun with that. Let's see, so I want to get back to the Hanover County houses too, because there's just, it's a lot of fun. Oatland's another one that was owned by the Page and Nelson family, home built in 1812. Ann Page, who still lives in Richmond, I think, she would come about every other week looking for exterior shutters. And again, something that you can have made, but they're expensive to have made, so usually we'd stock a lot of those. We, right down the street here, which was a pretty cool project, Gualthamy Baptist Church. I don't know if you all remember Sumter Pretty. He called me he used to call me Jimmy Boy. And he said, Jimmy Boy, I got a deal for you. He said, but I just want one thing. So he wanted an 18-inch wide heart pine board that was up on the roof. When we got there, the congregation was smart. They had peeled off the copper roof and turned it in for scrap. But we were left with a beautiful pine roof. So we took that church all the way to the ground. We still have some of the Gothic top shutters at Caravati that came off, and there was a beautiful bell tower. It was six-sided that came down all in one piece, and that is in a garden here in Ashland. And there's a couple that used to work with Diane Hale at the dance studio. They were not from the U.S. They'd come in. They lived near us at one point. But they bought that for their garden. I thought that was pretty cool as a garden piece in the center. So we live at Hanover Courthouse, and right behind us is a really cool house called Wilton. It just sold to the owner of the Good Feet store. And it's a really cool Victorian house that has some Queen Anne windows. And that was built in 1885 by Judge Cardwell, who built 6 homes in our area. Our house was built in 1901, and it's going to be on the Ashland Garden Tour in 2026. Okay. I have a lot of work to do. So in the town of Ashland, you all are familiar where the post office is. That was owned by old Dr. Blair, and he had an office there, and that was a really cool house. Pat Funk, his daughter, she called us when we were in Richmond and said, hey, I've got a really good job for you. Well, that was a neat project because it had, it was literally untouched. It had beautiful, as far as the porch columns, they were turned, and then it had a really nice pair of front entry doors. And again, they were a Victorian era, and this is something that you would see. These are the old stays. This would be at the top with the chain pull to lock one door down, and this would be at the bottom. And when you think about the ingenuity back in the 1870s, 1880s, this you would push down with your foot and, well, kick this button right here, and this would release and the door would open. I mean, who knew? I mean, who knew that and how to figure those things out? Again, they're cast iron embossed, and so the home up here had some hardware exactly like this. That house, I would need to do some research on that to be accurate. Again, I think probably, I want to say 1890, I think. Yeah. It had some evidence of being that old. A lot of times we can date houses. There's a nail chart. We have a book at work, and you can actually date the house from the nails in the wood. Which is really neat, yeah. Something else that's really cool, this is a sweep. This came from England, and they invented, for the old row house doors, this was usually mounted on the interior side, it was decorative, and when you close the door, it would hit the jamb, if I can make this thing work, and the sweep would activate, so it would keep all the bugs and the critters out. again, you know, something that's very crudely done, and you know,
What do you call it?
a sweep. It's a door sweep. So, okay, something that was fun, and Kate's not here tonight, but we worked on the Meadow Farm. And when Eric Friedlander bought the house, he did not want the house, and so we got the job to tear it down. The cool thing about that house was, for the first time in my career, and I was trying to think back, we did that, I think it was in the early 90s. And when we went in, again, the house was just all complete on the inside. There were 6-panel colonial doors. And all of us are used to raised panel doors, you know, the flat panels. All of these panels were fluted, which was really, really cool, almost like fluting on a column. I mean, something that you very rarely see. And then around the panel, they were beaded. They had very significant fireplace mantels in there. The roofing slate was all random thickness and all random in size. There was not one piece that was exactly alike. Can you imagine putting that on a roof? It was very thick and good. We took the entryway out. We actually cut that entire thing out with a Sawzall, and in the Secretariat book, there's a picture of the entry way in there. It's leaning against a tree. So we would do that right before we loaded it up. So that was really neat. That was a great job. It wasn't too far from home, which was good. And so we had a good time doing that as well. The interior foyer went, I was trying to think back, Penny Tweedy, who's Kate's mom, who was the owner of Secretariat, her family, she wanted the foyer a light fixture. So we took that down, we packed it up, and I believe we shipped that to her in New York. It's pretty cool.
I'll save a lot from that house. That was a
We saved really a significant amount. One thing I didn't mention that I wrote in my notes was in the corners of that house, there were these beams that were called hog troughs. And so they would hand hewn the corner of the house out, and they would tie in with wooden pegs, an old bracing. They used a mortise and a tenon joint. And when my demolition contractor went to, we would dismantle a lot of it, usually by hand, but he wanted to push on it to loosen the pins up a little bit. And he put the loader bucket up to it, and he couldn't budge it. I mean, that house was in great shape. It was in really, really good shape.
It was really sad for them to
Yeah.
take that house back.
Yeah.
It was really sad.
That happens, but I was really glad that we're around, hopefully those times, just to save those parts and to offer them to somebody else. This was pre-internet, it was pre-cell phone. I ran an ad in the classified ads in the Richmond newspaper, Secretariat's mantles. I think we sold every one of them within a month.
Right, I bet.
It was fun, yeah.
When was it built?
I need to look back on that too. That house, it was, I think, right before the turn of the century, maybe the 1890s, 1900. Yeah, it was early. Let's see. Do you all remember a house by the name of Dundee? So it's off of 605. It was owned, the Haw family, I think, was part of the, they may have been Jeb Stewart's cousins. And they built the house between 1810 and 1820. Elaine and I looked at that house. It was for sale, and we looked at it before we bought our house at Hanover Courthouse, and it was just a little too much to tackle. You know, we had, at that point, we had 4 children, and that was just a lot to do. But it's all restored. It's called the Preserve now. Richard Barrett's son inherited the house, and he's turned it into a wedding venue, and I think a hunting preserve, which is pretty neat. So it's still there. It's still really cool. So those are just some homes that that I mentioned that I wrote down. You know, things that we had worked on over the years. I want to pass this around. If it's a little dusty, it was under. But these were just some things, just some pictures of the early years back when I was a young guy. But you can see some of the artifacts in those newspaper articles.
Do you still do demolition work?
We do not do the actual demo. We'll go in and do the gutting work, the removal, but we sub out the demolition work to Pryor Harling, Fred Pryor, and his son Rick. Fred, I'm not sure how Fred's doing. Yeah, Ben still works with Rick, but we became really close friends, and he would call me, and it was we would get jobs that came through our desk for him that we'd pass on, and he'd call me if he had a Churchill house or he had a house, in the country. He'd say, Jimmy, it's coming down in 3 weeks, have at it. So anything we wanted to take out of the house was great. Yeah. So it was fun. So I wanted to share something else for you. You all are probably familiar with this. These things we get calls for. This is made out of, this is a pressed metal. This is a fireplace, a cover that was on the coal fireplaces. There wasn't, in those days they didn't have dampers. So they'd close the fireplace off with these old covers. This is tin, but a lot of them were cast iron, and very significant to the fireplace to keep the warm air that, if they had warm air inside from it, going up the chimney. Yeah. So my son Ben, our oldest son Ben, he's taken the business over. Elaine and I turned it over to him 2 years ago this March, and he's running the business now. He worked for me from the time he helped me on the Marymount job when he was probably he was a freshman at Atlee High School then, and he helped me I think when he was in the 8th grade as well. So he knows more about it than the other 5 of our children, but all of them have helped out over the years, here and there. Yeah. And we moved. We sold our property that was in Manchester. We had 40,000 square feet down there and owned about a block and a half equivalent in the city, and we sold that. They were, encroaching upon us with apartments and condos and things like that. So we decided to sell it in 2022, is I think when we closed on the last deal, and we moved up here. This June will be 5 years to Ashland, and that's gone by fast. I remember the day that we opened the doors, and I think we had 400 people in there. It was awesome. But Ashland has been a great home for us. We live 10 minutes away, so it's been great. I don't have to travel 95 anymore, and neither do the kids, so it worked out well. So we still offer a lot of the services that we had back then. We still have an active shop and things that we work on for folks that need to be refurbished and that.
How about within the building you're in now?
The Loving Building?
What have you found in there?
So we haven't found too many things. Of course, it was a Ford Motor dealership, so there were some pieces and parts. I will share with you, y'all may have heard this, I did find a 1929 Ford Model A car that was back in the corner, and that's we acquired that, and that's in our barn, and it's running. I want to report that it is running, and I'm hoping I can get it in the Ashland parade. I want to get with our landlord and see if she has a logo that I can the old Love and Ford logo that I can put on the side. But it was fun getting it running. An old 83-year-old friend of mine who's had those cars came out every Monday afternoon and helped me with that thing for many, many Mondays, and we got it going. It was traded in 1968, and it sat in that corner from 1968 until the time we moved it. But whoever put the car away knew what they were doing, because there wasn't anything frozen up on the car. It was all there, and it was really cool. And he said, I think we can get this started. And that was music to my ears. It's really cool. It's neat. But as far as other artifacts, they said there was an elevator in there one time for automobiles, but you can see the big I-beams in there, the evidence of where that would have held those. And I remember seeing the old office for the first time. That was pretty cool. It was in some disrepair. It took about a year to get it all fixed up, but I mean, it's a great space now. We've had some events there for people. We've had some rehearsal dinners. We've had Kiwanis Club, the Antique Auto Club has been through. The Garden Club of Ashland has used it for certain events. It's a great space. It's a lot of fun. Yep.
Jimmy, talk about the lighting.
So the lighting, so we do have a guy, Tommy Hamilton, who's been with us for a long time. He's our lighting specialist. He also buffs out all the hardware and things that we display in our case, and he'll buff out anything for customers that they may have. He redoes light fixtures people bring in. There wasn't, or currently there's not a company in Ashland that refurbishes our light fixtures and lamps. So he does a good job for us. He's there a couple days a week and really works hard in getting them rewired. And sometimes we put some original parts back in them that we have, or sometimes the reproduction parts. But the lighting has always been great. Crystal chandeliers have, I can remember my parents, having one in the dining room, and I remember having to clean the thing with ammonia, which I hated. But crystal chandeliers have come back, and it's something that people ask for, especially the wedding cake one that they can hang in a bathroom or something like that. Those are really fun to work with. I'll tell you a quick story about that. So there was a job we did in Charlottesville and Farmington. I'm not going to mention her name, but there was a renowned interior designer out of New York who bought a stone house right behind the golf course up there. It was a beautiful place. And we were asked to come up and pick up doors that they were going to remove. They gutted the entire house. The house was never insulated. It was just plaster over stone, so they wanted to redo the walls and insulate, so they gutted everything. Didn't save a whole lot. So we removed some beautiful French doors and things, and there were some light fixtures in there. Well, over next to the dumpster, there was a Austrian cut crystal chandelier that was in a trash bag full of plaster. So I asked the contractor, I said, what you gonna do with that fixture over there? He said, oh, that's trash. He said, you want it? I said, sure. He said, just throw it on the back of your truck. So I bought it back, gave it to Tommy. Tommy steam cleaned it, fixed everything. I think it needed some bow beshes and everything, and just different crystals, but there wasn't a whole lot missing. And we hung that chandelier after that, and I think I can't remember, it was priced at $29.95, $2,995, and we ended up selling, I'm not sure for what, but something close to that. But that's the old cliche, one man's junk is another man's treasure. I mean, in all due respect, I mean, sometimes they know, sometimes they don't know, or they just don't care, and they're going to put everything new in it. So that happens sometimes.
The fact that that was an interior designer.
Yeah, so that was, but that was interesting, because that's just kind of how the trend is. I mean, everything runs in a cycle. We're selling things today that we sold 30 and 40 years ago that are popular again. And I think everything, like this, everything has a season, everything has a cycle.
And
So-
I remember we bought a tub from you and Jerry Peer put it in
Yes.
the oven. He's a sculptor who, it made very large, statues.
Yeah, he did corporate
Painted.
sculptures.
He had to cook them.
Yeah, Jerry lived right over here
Still does.
off of
Elmont.
Elmont, and he had a powder coating booth.
Yeah.
So we would powder coat the bathtubs. We'd sandblast them all the way down to the raw cast iron and powder coat them. And that was a really good finish. The tubs, something fun about those is they made them from 3.5 feet long up to 6 feet long, and for short people and tall people. And the little ones we think were probably children's tubs. They were probably off of a nursery somewhere, but they were really cute little tubs. Again, you know, the tub market, it usually comes and goes. It slows down a little bit. A lot of people, I mean, when you get our age now, you don't want to be stepping over the side of the tub and all that. But and we, you know, we sell fixtures for the bathtubs. You can still buy the big shower heads and the rings and everything for them, for the curtains and all that. Pedestal sinks, that's another thing that, again, they have their time. I mean, they were very popular here during the 80s, and they've slowed down a little bit. But, you know, for the most part, it's a lot of fun. The really significant thing about our business is that every day is different. And I'll tell you, there wasn't a time that I didn't want to wake up and go to work every single day within the 40 years I had with it. It was just fun. It was just fun. We met all walks of life. My mother, if she was still here today, God rest her soul, tells me that Whoopi Goldberg came into our shop downtown. And I think she did because she was there with some of the filming that was going on. We had movie stars that would walk in between sets. Heck, I didn't know who I was talking to sometimes. It would go right over my head. But it was fun, you know, you just never knew. Y'all might remember Roger Mudd. He was Walter Cronkite's co-anchor when we landed on the moon in 1969. He walked in with his wife, driving a modest old Volvo station wagon, and bought a pair of exterior shutters for us home on the Chesapeake Bay. That was a lot of fun. Sounded exactly the same, almost looked exactly the same. So that was a lot of fun. But we had, you know, it was a great time, it really was. And I really enjoy it, I still do. Elaine has to correct me sometimes when I'm driving because my eye wanders. I mean, I can spot things that, you know, probably the average person wouldn't see. She said, keep your eyes on the road. So that window in the middle up top, so that's the window that came from First Baptist Church over in Rocky Mount. Yeah, that's a Palladian window, and it had the grapes in it, and that was the last one. We've sold all of them now, but we had 10 complete sets of those. This window right there in the middle, the real decorative one, that was a skylight that came out of one of the Scott's homes of Scott and Stringfellow downtown on Franklin Street. We're really surprised that they let it go. That ended up, I think, down in Charleston, South Carolina. That was a huge piece. That thing was 7.5 feet square. It was a big one. Yeah. Oh yeah. So right after my grandfather, before he died, he wrote some notes to himself to go to the Jefferson Hotel. So the hotel was sold. It was sold to the Ross brothers. This is way before Sheraton bought them. And they redid the hotel from the 6th floor all the way down to the ground floor. And we ended up being able to go and purchase all kinds of things, you know, doors, fixtures, beautiful hardware. The China toilets, which were really cool if you like toilets. Inside the bowl, stamped in blue ink, it had the Jefferson. And they were it was in quotation. So when Louis Genter had the hotel built, whoever the manufacturer was, probably out of Trenton, New Jersey, that's where a lot of the fixtures came from in those days. That's where a lot of the tile companies originated. He had them stamp the Jefferson in it, which was really cool. The mezzanine floor had beautiful egg-shaped brass doorknobs that were reeded, and then they had the rings on the other side, and they were patented in 1887 along with the hinges. Famous people stayed there. It was pretty cool. Marble sinks on the mezzanine floor with, I think there were brass brackets or bronze brackets. And then Millen Roads came along. They redid Millen Roads, and heck, all of us who were born, I was born in the 50s, I mean, we all remember that. The windows downtown at our Christmas time. And so we got to remove some of the inner walls and the windows. So they had like the arch windows and doors that looked like paneling that would open up. There was some stained glass there. There was some parquet floor. When you went up the escalator to see Santa Claus, you walked across a parquet floor. That was pretty cool, pulling that out. Some really neat old fixtures that came out of there. So it was good. It was just some fun projects. We never hesitated to go anywhere when people called. When we were using Polaroid cameras, that's how we would take pictures of things that we saw so we could reference those, prior to cell phones and all that. So I had a collection of old Polaroid pictures, which was kind of cool. And I think, there's some in a scrapbook somewhere. And but we, it was just neat. The business evolved a lot. There were probably some things that I did that my grandfather probably didn't do, and some things I'm sure things that he did that I tried to carry on as well. But it's just it's a business that you never got tired of. It's always something different. Yeah. Yes.
To me, it sounds like you sold all over the world. Is there
we mentioned bathtubs. We sold a bathtub, shipped it to Thailand to the owner of Avis rental car. He was building a sailboat down there, and his wife wanted a footed bathtub on the sailboat. And the reason he was building it there is because labor was cheap. A lot less expensive. A lot of people have sailboats, or they're built in South America because of that same thing. So that was kind of neat. That was the first time thing that we did. Again, we shipped the radiators to Belgium. I'll tell you one. So there was a company that came over from England, and they were shooting a film, and they wanted an English pub, and so we had the remnants of an English pub, the doors and the walls and the tables and the benches and all those things. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you're from England, and you come in there. And they were shipping stuff back to film a pub. Yes, that was it. Oh yeah, so there was a really cool bank downtown off of Summit and Broad. It was the First Virginia Bank. And we walked into that as if the bank had just maybe had closed the day before, and they had beautiful walnut paneling all the way around the bank, and these light fixtures that were just humongous, hanging probably a ceiling as high as that. We had to go up through the attic to be able to bring those down. They had all kinds of marble slabs. The tellers' cages were really cool. They were neat. Just things like that. We didn't take it down. SB Cox did. We went in and we gutted it, and we ended up getting the vault door and things like that. And something really cool about that is that they had teller little houses outside of the bank, and there was a drive-through. There were two of them in between the exterior brick wall of the bank and these little houses. And we would think, okay, well, the teller walks from the bank and opens the door up and goes in. Well, that wasn't the case. There were tunnels up underneath the drive-throughs, and they would come up to a real little ladder and hatch. And I guess, when they were transferring their money back and forth to the bank, that was really cool. Also, I'm glad you mentioned that. There's one more thing. So
The guy for the museum.
yes, we had a guy that came and purchased all of the bank stuff. They were setting up a museum out of state, and he purchased. He came in one day. I mean, this is how things sometimes work. He walked in and he said, "Do you have any parts from a bank?" And I'm not kidding you. I think sometimes the good Lord helps out. I mean, we had just unloaded it on a Friday, and he walked in on a Monday. True story. I mean, it's like, well, yes. I do have plans to write a book. I'm glad that you mentioned that. My daughter, one of our daughters, Amelia, has written a book on nutrition, and I think she's starting another one soon. And for Christmas, gave me some of the tools to help me and the recorders to help me start it. So I think I am. Yeah, something I want to do in my retirement. I just got to make myself find the time to do it. So anyways, I want to tell you one more story, and maybe we have time. It's almost time. I just want to tell you, so someone asked me, there was a speaker that came to Caravati by the name of John Plashel. And he has a book which you can buy through Caravati's. I think you can buy it through maybe Barnes & Noble and places like that. And it's called Beautiful Broken Virginia. And he is in medical sales and woke up one morning and said, I don't have any hobbies. So he picked up a camera, and through his travels throughout the state of Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and a little further north, he takes country back roads and he photographs with permission old homes, old mansions and homes that are just kind of run down, where families, they don't want them or something like that, and or they're just sitting out in the middle of a farm on farmland. So he's published a book, and he's a storyteller. He's really good at it, and goes through all the pages in the book on what he's found. It's really cool. So I'm going to share something with you. This still makes my hair stand up sometimes. So before Elaine and I bought out in Hanover County, we looked in Goochland. There was a house called Dahlgren, and it was owned by a banker of Dominion Bank. He was retired. He was chairman of the board, and he met us the day we looked at it with a real estate agent, and it was near the correctional center off of Route 6. And he said, I just want you all to know before you go in the house, it's haunted. There is a widow, a mother of 2 boys, who is the ghost. And she's okay, she's friendly, but we just want to let you know that. We said, okay, So we looked around. We were kind of looking at school systems and things like that too. So we didn't buy the house. We ended up buying the house at Hanover Courthouse, and not long, I can't remember how many years it was several years after we looked at it, we had a guy that came into Caravati's downtown, and he bought in a Starapiget, very, very much, almost identical to this one right here, okay? Dahlgren, again, was built pre-Civil War. The story goes there were 2 sons who wanted to enlist. They were all excited about going to the Confederate camp. So they were running down the steps of the house from upstairs, and one tripped and his knee hit the picket, and it busted the picket in the weak spot right here. That's the most narrow part of this when you're turning this on a lathe, okay? And so the picket stayed broken, and I believe it was broken when Elaine and I looked at the house. And so the story goes, unfortunately, they were killed at war. Their mother lived on for several years, but she mourned the death of her son. So she would go through the house in the middle of the night. There was an oval picture frame of her sitting in a old exterior window that was part of the interior of the living room, and so they made it a place to put, like shelving for pictures. And the guy that bought the house said, yeah, it's haunted. He said, we'll wake up and we've heard this crash, and we'll wake up the next morning and the picture frame's on the other side of the room. And he said, then my children, he has children, he said that they hear footsteps in the upstairs hallway. I said, okay. So he said, I need to get something out of my car. So he comes in and he's holding a picket. And he said, I need a replacement for this, it's broken right here. So when we were downtown, how many pickets did we have, Elaine? 3,000 of them? I mean, had a ton of pickets from all these old houses. He goes and he picks one, and it's pretty doggone close, if not, one of the exact pickets. So he takes the picket, I sell it to him for $8, takes it, another 2 or 3 weeks go by, he walks back into Caravati's, and he's carrying the picket. The picket that I sold him was broken in the exact same spot as the one that he was trying to replace. True story. University of Virginia, and I think William and Mary, they've done studies on the house, of paranormal stuff. But that was cool. That's one of the most significant, we never found any money in the walls, we never found any money in the floors. Everybody asked me that question. But that story has always stuck with me. The ironic thing is the house has sold 2 more times. A young woman and her husband came to Caravati's up here in Ashland. She bought the house. Never heard the story. Never seen the ghosts. Never heard footsteps. And the picket that he replaced, which at that time was the 3rd one, is still there. The house was remodeled, but, so. Are there any more questions?
So let me ask you this question. Now that your son is running the business, I'm curious. So how different does he think on some things than you do when it comes to the business?
Yes. So yeah, he has put everything on computer. I had log books. I had stacks and stacks of log books, and they were all numbered. So I would label all my pricing. Now, these have barcode. I had numbers on them. Things that wouldn't hold a tag, I would take an old marker and write it on the back of it. And I could go to my lot system and look something up about as fast as you can key that same thing in the computer, because I was used to doing it. We were audited in 1996. It was not fun. We thought we were pretty innocent in what we were doing. My grandfather never had an inventory back in the day. I mean, no one ever asked. So we were audited, and they said, well, Mr. Kastelberg, how can you gross X number of thousands of dollars, whatever, and have a basis of 0? They said, there's got to be a basis tax, the cost of goods sold. So we came up, Mike Hicks, who worked for me for 10 years, who was a godsend, he was awesome. We came up with a lot system. And we recorded every single thing that came through those doors in a lot book. I could tell you the item, I could tell you who we purchased it from, what date we purchased it, the date it sold, and what it sold for. And so after 1996, we were legit. I mean, we had it all down. I was never audited again. That was a lesson to be learned. We had a good CPA back in the day, but I guess he didn't feel the need to have the lot system. But we have one now, and it's all on computer. But anyways, but that really helped us. It made us more efficient, which was great.
Ask that question because I know when my father had his trucking business and my brother would drive with him, and my brother used to tell my dad, well, Dad, you so-and-so. I said, well, then I would listen to them talking. I said, well, Dad, didn't you teach him? But now he's trying to tell you.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what I was wondering about with your son.
Well, and to be honest, that's one reason why I felt like I would retire and turn the business over to Ben. It was time for him. He's in his 40s, and it's just time. I didn't want to be in my 70s or 80s and turn it over to him when he was in his 50s or whatever, or 60s. It was just time. I had some surgery done. It was kind of a wake-up call for me. So I said, maybe it's time to step back and smell the roses a little bit. So I've been very busy in retirement. We're building an addition right now. The kids are calling it Westminster Kastelberg. And so we can stay there. I'll send us to a home, but we're doing that, and I've put old things in it. I have a good contractor from Ashland, and he's been very patient with us. But we've used old doors and I have old mantles and beautiful French doors and things like that. So it's been fun. And so my time has been between that and cutting grass. I have another son who's in the pool service business. I'm his pool boy. So I'm doing that. I help Ben at Caravati's when he needs me. So it's one of those things where, you never, can you ever really walk away? Probably the answer is no. But he's good. Ben does things his way now, and I've got to accept that. I'll be honest, it's hard sometimes, but he's learned it. He knows the art to this business is acquiring the material. If you buy it for a fair price and you sell it for a fair price, you're going to be okay. So that's the art, is not to go too overboard with it, because it's going to sit for a while. It's not for everybody. Not everybody has an old home. So it's one of those things where you just got to, it's more about being patient, and you just hope the right customer walks in the door.
Have you ever given advice on how to maintain what you've installed?
Yes, we have. Some people have asked that. That being said, they would want to know how to take care of a footed bathtub, how to clean it, what to clean it with. We had a lot of experience with that. Hardware was another one. How do you keep it shined without having to pull it all back off and do it all over again? There are things like that we help with. Refinishing is a fun thing if you really get into it, and they ask questions about what stains to use or what waxes to use, and we've learned all that over the years. Yeah. The neat thing is that there are a handful of really good contractors in the restoration business who are willing to work with old stuff. Sometimes that comes, if you're dealing with newer, maybe younger generations, they don't want to take the time to fool with it. Sometimes we lose sales to that. You might have a young girl or guy that comes in, they're really gung-ho about this really cool old door, for a pantry. They call their contractor, and is it in a jam? Well, no, it's not in a jam. Well, then, I don't want to hang it. You need to go to Lowe's and buy it new. So we've had to give a little bit of education on you're not going to find heart pine or you're not going to find walnut unless it's special order. So there's those kind of things. But that's fun as well. You can, it's all good. So, well, thank you. Any more questions? I guess we're about out of time. Yeah. Sure.
I think a lot of us have those old shutters. Is there a shutter specialist, somebody who's willing to put them shutters?
To repair them?
To make your house interior.
We can help you a little bit of that. A lot of them just have to be re-glued if they're not rotted. If parts have to be made, that can be a challenge. Slats can be made, or the louvers can be made. When the tenon and mortise goes, that to be all all pulled apart, and sometimes new pieces made to go back in. Shutters are expensive because it's a specialty thing for a lot of mills. They're not, you have to have the right jigs and the right patterns to make them, up from scratch. Our shutters, just to share with you, it took me 14 years to find the shutters for my house. We have 6-foot windows upstairs and 80-inch windows down. So I would collect them, put them in the barn, collect them, put them in the barn. And one day, one of our daughters was married 13, 14 years ago, and I said, those shutters need to go up. So we put them up, and they look a lot better. On an old house, we had vinyl shutters on there, and it just, it just doesn't go. Yeah, I'm not a purist, but I've been out here long enough to look at something and figure out whether it's a real fit or not. I'm a real stickler on that. But yeah, it's all good. Yeah. Well, thank you. It's been an honor to talk to you all this evening. We love Ashland. Ashland's an awesome place, and I hope we have more people that are interested in buying the older homes up here and hanging on to them. Sometimes they become a thing of the past, so it's important to hang on to them. Thanks again. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy. That was fantastic. I told you you were in for a treat, and thank you so much for sharing all of this.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
I do have a small part. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Ashland Historic Districts. I will keep it short, but I just want to give a little personal story here. Part of the reason that we're having these sessions is to educate residents and property owners on the value of their homes to them themselves as their investment, but also our community. And to make sure that you know about the resources that are out there, so that you know that if you needed a replacement, instead of going to Lowe's and getting maybe that newer vinyl item, perhaps you could go to Caravati's, or now you know about tax credits, and we're going to learn more throughout the other sessions. And so I learned a lot at the last session, and my church has a slate roof. It's a church from 1858, and they made a motion to get rid of the slate roof and put up asphalt shingles, and it was only going to cost $12,000. What a deal. I was heartbroken. I lost sleep for a good bit of time, and after this session, I think it was just perfect timing. I went to them and said, we need to speak to Elliot and his family and have them come and look at it. And so through connections, I got a couple roofers to come out, because the only roofer that they contacted was a local roofer, and he didn't know slate. He knew asphalt shingles. And so instead of $12,000 for asphalt shingles, we're going to pay $1,000 and have 25 of our tiles replaced. Isn't it great? I went to Caravati to see if they could help me. And so so that's what these sessions are about, is making those connections and finding out all the resources. And so big thanks to the museum for helping us, and for Jimmy for all that you've done. So now on to my presentation, which I will keep short because we're running behind here a little bit. So, in the town of Ashland, we're blessed with 3 historic districts. The first being the Ashland Historic District, and we have the full map here where you can see all of the districts. And we have Miss Roseanne Schauf here, who helped with this original district and got it into the register in 1983. At the time, our time of significance went to, I believe it was this 66 maybe, and so we updated that in 2017 so that all the buildings over the past 35 years that didn't get included back in 1983 could be added to our register. And so now we have, I believe, 497 resources within that district. Shortly thereafter, we worked with the Department of Historic Resources and got a grant to create the Berkeley Town Community Historic District. And that was done in 2019, again with assistance through the museum and the Department of Historic Resources. I was shocked that it hadn't been designated before, because just knowing the people in the community and the buildings there and the stories, I really wanted to make sure that was being captured and that we could share that and celebrate that. And so I think DHR was thrilled to be a partner in that as well. And so I was going to go into a lot of details on those districts, but I'm not going to do that tonight. I have the nominations over there, and if you'd like to talk about the specifics, I can do that. And then the third one is Randolph-Macon College, and so theirs is less a large district, but 3 buildings. the Pace, Franklin, and Duncan Chapel buildings. So here are just some pictures from each of the 3 districts. And this, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the loss of historic assets. So when a property is demolished, or that slate roof turns into an asphalt shingle, or those vinyl shutters, which those can be replaced eventually, or it goes from maybe the wood siding to a vinyl siding, that really does impact the historic significance of the property, and it becomes no longer a contributing structure, which I think we talked about contributing structures at the last session. And so you can see here at the top, just talking about the number of contributing structures. Back in 1983 in the historic district, we had 201 contributing structures. And then when we redid the property, we had 111. And then here are the numbers for the historic district. And you can see there were 114 total structures, and 76 of those were contributing. There was a good number of structures that weren't homes, so most of the homes have actually been very well protected in the Berkeley Town District, but there are a lot of new accessory buildings, the garages and sheds and such that have been added, and those are all included here. So again, a loss of those assets does impact the community, and so we've seen several of our contributing structures demolished, and a lot of that has been said because it'd be hard to rehab or restore these buildings, but it is possible, and we usually do try to have some professionals go and talk to the property owners before the buildings are demolished. And then the one top right is just an example of someone coming in and doing repairs and renovations and making a very beautiful building that will contribute to our district, but not historically. It's taking away the historic significance of that structure. So our next project, because of the age of the Henry Clay Elementary School building, it was not included in our original 1983 district creation. And since it was not in the district, it did not get included in the 2017 update. And the reason it wasn't included in 1983 is that it, at the time, was not old enough to be included. It was not 50 years or older to be included. But it is now, and as you all know, the county has taken over ownership from the Hanover County school system, and they are working through a process to determine what to do with that structure. And so we are working with them and the Department of Historic Resources to hopefully get this designated as a contributing structure so that a future developer can use historic tax credits to redevelop the school and to preserve it. So that was my 25-minute presentation in 10 minutes, and I'm sorry if I didn't cover a lot of the information, but happy to answer any questions you all might have about our district. Or, you know what, I probably should mention, let me back up right in. In the town of Ashland, the reason that properties can be demolished or altered is that we don't have an ordinance. A lot of communities throughout the country have historic district ordinances where they regulate from all spectrums what you can do and what you can't do to your property. Some are very, very strict, some are just advisory. Within our comprehensive plan, we do talk about the creation of an architectural review board on a voluntary level. Not that we would adopt ordinances that says you can't change your porch, or you can't change your roof, or you can't demolish your building without approval from this board, but where we would get professionals who would come in and give their expertise to someone, a homeowner or a property owner, who is looking to do improvements to their building. And so we may talk to them about the types of windows they're looking at and provide an architect or a historian who may be able to provide them information. And so I think that's the route that our comprehensive plan is recommending, and our town council will be taking that up, I would imagine. But I don't see us at this time taking on a more legislative role where we would tell people what they can and can't do with their structures. We're on the education route right now. So again, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And we have the next session coming up in May, I believe. and I hope to see you all there. I also did bring a copy of Rosie's book, Ashland, Ashland. We use it here in the office all the time when someone comes up and calls about a house. We check to see what the story is and share that with the people, especially if they're new to the community. And the theme of our comprehensive plan is what makes Ashland, Ashland. So if you'd like to look at that or any of the resources we have over there, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes.
So Nora, can Henry Clay, can the building continue as a school? Has it?
Could continue as a school.
Okay.
That would be an allowable use.
Okay.
Yes.
Like a private school, maybe.
A private school, or if the county decided they wanted another public school.
So was it less expensive to build the new elementary school on Independence? Obviously, there's more land there than to restore Henry Clay.
That is my understanding,
Right, yeah.
and they were able to combine all the students into one school.
Also, yes, you're right. Okay. Yep.
Is there, I have a question about a lot of rental property in our district. Is there anything that can be done to make sure that there's no more rental, or what guidelines do we have? Because some of the homes, like you were saying, I was looking at the number of structures we used to have, and some of it has been turned into rental property.
Right now, we don't have anything regulating how many rentals there can be. Some communities do rental registrations, but that really doesn't deter people from buying more rentals.
Yeah, Berkeley campus affected by that.
Big time. And what has
Yeah.
happened is that some of those homes, the way they've been renovated, it has to continue to stay rental. They couldn't go back to a single family home unless they actually gut it out and redo it again on the inside. And so, and then.
If the owner had known, they could get, not only town, but, state, but federal tax credits to fix it up right, that would have saved the buildings.
Yeah, well, a lot of it is education, and a
Yeah.
lot of it is when children no longer live in the community, parents pass away, they just want to sell the property, and then it's bought by somebody else who guts it out, makes one central living area with multiple bedrooms.
Yeah.
So that even if I wanted to go back and buy a house, a single family couldn't live in that home because of the way it's constructed on the inside. And I know next door to us, from what I understand, the water and sewer is not even separated. So you have somebody living upstairs, somebody living downstairs, but they gotta come downstairs and split the bill and come downstairs and do their laundry or whatever they do, which I didn't know until the previous tenant was telling us some of the issues they had.
We do have a rule that no more than 3 non-family members can live together.
But it's up to those of us who live in the neighborhood
Yeah.
to say, we think there's more, and you can report it to I don't know, who do you report it to?
Hope.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Good, poor thing.
Like I said, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something I never thought about,
In our neighborhood, we watch the number of cars there.
Sometimes they can fool you too, but you see in and out.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but still.
So we don't have the parking issue as bad as in some of the other when we had the parking permits and stuff. So we don't have the parking issues so much.
Yeah,
Yes,
but the number of cars that are
people.
parked there give you an indication of the number of people who are staying.
Staying there, yeah.
We
That's a
took
good
pictures.
point.
One of the guys in our neighborhood went down and took pictures over a regular period, and they discovered that, and it actually worked. So we reduced the number of houses being used for
Good point.
students.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah.
So Nora, is there an exception for college students? I mean, because more than 2 college students live in you know, if they're going to share, like if it's a 3-bedroom house,
Nope.
are there 6 students living in there or
No,
just?
they can have 3 students.
Okay, so that's something that's regulated right now?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's, yes.
Right, okay. And no more?
No more than 3.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
There's reason in that.
All right, well, we're past our time. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you at our next session. I think it's May 6th, but the date's over there.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah.